She was standing in the diaper aisle, not moving, not reaching, just standing there with a box in her hands and a number in her head that did not add up. The store was loud around her. Carts rolling, registers beeping, a child crying somewhere near the back. She did not hear any of it. She was doing math that had no good answer. Her name was Carol Briggs, 26 years old, one baby at home, no husband, no help. She had driven to this Walmart in Las Vegas on a Tuesday afternoon in the winter of 1960, with $11 in her purse and a list of things her daughter needed. The diapers alone were $4.30. That left $6.70 for everything else on the list. It was not enough. She already knew it was not enough before she got in the car. But she had come anyway, because sometimes you go to the store hoping the numbers will change even when you know they will not. She put the box back on the shelf, stood there another moment. Then she started walking toward the door with nothing in her hands. Nobody in that store knew who was about to walk through the entrance. Nobody would have expected it. And what happened in the next 20 minutes was not witnessed by reporters. There were no cameras, no publicists. Just a Tuesday afternoon and a handful of strangers who would carry what they saw for the rest of their lives. This is not a story about a celebrity doing something generous. This is a story about what a man does when nobody is watching and nothing he does will ever help his career. That is the only moment that tells you who someone really is. Dean Martin was in Las Vegas that week because he was always in Las Vegas. The Sands Hotel was his second home, his third home. His real home, some people said. He had been performing there since the mid-50s, and by 1963, he had settled into something that looked like ease from the outside and felt like a second skin from the inside. He was not scheduled to perform that night. He had finished a 3-night run the Friday before and had a few days of nothing official on his calendar. Nothing official meant he still ate lunch at the same counters, still drove the same routes, still wandered into stores without an agenda the way most men wander into their own kitchens. He was not famous in the way that made people stop breathing. He was famous in the way that made people feel comfortable. That was rarer and harder to explain. You know what it is like to be in a room with someone who makes the temperature drop 2 degrees. You watch what you say. You straighten up. You perform a version of yourself that is slightly better than the original. Dean Martin was the opposite of that. He was the person who walked in and made the room remember how to breathe. He had grown up with nothing in Steubenville, Ohio. His father was a barber. His mother did not speak English for years. He had worked in a steel mill at 17. He understood what it felt like to count money before the week was over and find you were already short. That was the part that never left him. Not the counting itself, the feeling around the counting, the way your body knows the number before your mind confirms it, the way you do not ask for help because asking for help makes it real in a way you cannot take back. Carol Briggs had been in Las Vegas for 2 years. She had come with a husband who worked construction. The work had been good for a while. Then the work was less good. Then the work stopped. Then the husband stopped too. He left 8 months before that Tuesday. He said he was going to look for work in Phoenix. He sent 1 letter. Then he stopped sending letters. She had a job at a laundry service near the Strip. She worked 6 days a week. The pay was regular but not large. She had a neighbor, an older woman named Barbara, who watched Marie during the day. Barbara did not charge her much, but much was relative. She had been managing. That was the word she used later in the one conversation she had about this day with a close friend. she said. I was managing. Managing is a word that means you are doing it, but the margin is thin enough to see through. The month before that Tuesday had taken more than expected. Marie had been sick, a doctor's visit, medication, the kind of unexpected cost that is small in a life that has room for it and enormous in a life that does not. She had been managed, and then she was not. And so she had driven to Walmart with $11 and a list and the specific kind of hope that is not really hope at all but the forward motion of a person who does not know what else to do but keep going. He had been broke in his early 20s in a specific and grinding way, the way that is not dramatic, not cinematic, just constant, low-level, exhausting arithmetic, choosing which bill to pay, choosing which meal to skip, choosing which appointment to miss, because getting there cost money you did not have. He had boxed for money when he was young. Prize fights in small venues in Ohio. He was not a natural boxer. He had a broken nose from those years. He boxed because boxing paid, and paying was the only thing that mattered at the time. He had worked as a croupier at a casino before he was famous. He dealt cards to men who spent in an evening what he could not earn in a month. He watched that. He remembered watching that, not with bitterness. He was not built for bitterness, but with the clear eyes of someone who is cataloging something important without knowing yet why it is important. He got out. He worked out. He got lucky in the right rooms at the right times. He will tell you himself that luck was most of it. Any honest person who gets out of that kind of broke will tell you luck was most of it. But he remembered. That was the difference between men who remembered and men who did not. Some people escape poverty and spend the rest of their lives trying to prove they were never there. Some people escape poverty and carry it with them like a second set of senses. Dean Martin carried it like that second set of senses. He could feel it when he saw it. That morning he had been driving without a destination. He did that sometimes when he had free days, got in the car and let the city go by. Las Vegas in the daytime was a different place than Las Vegas at night. Quieter, smaller, more honest. He pulled into the Walmart parking lot because he needed cigarettes. That was the whole reason. A man needed cigarettes and he stopped at the closest store. That is all. But something happens sometimes when a man walks into an ordinary place at an ordinary hour for an ordinary reason. Something he did not plan for. Something that turns a Tuesday into a story people are still telling 60 years later. Here is what nobody who tells this story ever mentions first. He was in a good mood that day. Not performing a good mood. Actually in one. His daughter Claudia had called him that morning from school. She had gotten a perfect score on a spelling test. She was 7 years old, and she was very proud of herself, and he had sat on the edge of the bed and listened to her read every word back to him. He was still carrying that phone call around with him when he walked through the automatic doors. He went to the back of the store first. That was his habit. He always went to the back first, because that was where the things he actually needed were. He picked up his cigarettes, grabbed a newspaper, started walking back toward the registers. He saw Carol Briggs from 20 feet away. She was not crying. That is the detail that people miss when they tell this story. She was not crying and she was not asking anyone for help. She was simply standing at the shelf, putting the box of diapers back with the careful, practiced movements of someone who had made this decision before, who knew how to do it without making a scene, who had learned to knead things quietly. Dean stopped walking. Now ask yourself something about that moment. What made him stop? It was not a dramatic gesture on her part. It was not a sound. It was not a request. It was a woman putting something back on a shelf. That is a thing that happens in every store every hour of every day. So why did he stop? Because he recognized the specific way she did it. The alignment, the care, the unnecessary neatness, the way of putting something back that communicates, I am not a person who makes messes. I am not a person who causes trouble. I am a person who takes care of things, even the things I cannot have. He had seen that before. Not here. Not in this store. But he had seen it in the faces of people back in Steubenville, in the way his mother moved through rooms she was not sure she belonged in the way working people carry themselves in spaces where they feel their need is visible. He watched her for a moment. She did not see him. She put the box on the shelf and aligned it carefully with the others. A small, unnecessary gesture of neatness in a moment that had nothing neat about it. Then she turned and started toward the exit. He had a choice right then. Say nothing. Let her go. Buy his cigarettes and his newspaper and leave. No one would have known the difference. She would not have known the difference. That is the thing about silence in moments like this. It leaves no evidence. 3 people in that store saw him watching her. A stock boy near the end of the aisle. A woman with 2 children near the formula. The stock boy was 17. He said later that he thought he was about to watch a celebrity make a scene. That he braced himself, because in his experience, famous people in stores usually meant someone being uncomfortable. He was wrong about what he was about to see. Most men would have said nothing, not because they were cruel, because it is uncomfortable to interrupt a stranger's dignity. Because offering help to someone who did not ask for it feels like pointing out a wound. Because it is easier to walk past. Dean Martin was not most men. Here is the question nobody ever asked out loud. Was he right to follow her? Was that an intrusion? Or was it the only human thing to do in that moment? Drop a comment. 1 line is enough. If stories like this are the kind that stay with you, subscribe. We find the moments that history almost forgot. He caught up to her near the end of the aisle. He did not announce himself. He did not say his name. He just stepped up beside her and said, "Excuse me, ma'am." She turned. She saw him. Her face changed in the way faces do when you recognize someone from television and your brain cannot reconcile it with the fact that they are standing next to you in a store on an ordinary Tuesday. She said his name before she could stop herself. He smiled. He said, "I noticed you put something back." And before she could answer that, before she could find the right polite way to say that she was fine and she did not need anything, he said, "I did not mean to pry. I just want to help if you will let me." She looked at him for a moment. She said she was fine. He said, "I know you are. I can see that you are." He said it in a way that meant it, not as a dismissal, as a recognition. Then he said, "But I would really like to help anyway. There is a kind of offer that does not put the receiver in debt. Most offers do not work that way. Most offers carry weight, obligation, the unspoken expectation of gratitude that has to be paid back somehow. The offer Dean made in that aisle was not that kind. It was the kind that comes from someone who does not need anything back, who has enough, who is offering simply because the opportunity is there and it would be wrong to walk past it. She said yes, not eagerly, not immediately. She said yes the way a person says yes when they have been carrying something alone for a long time and someone finally just asks if they can help hold it. He walked her back to the diaper aisle. He told her to get what she needed, not what she could afford, what she needed. She was careful at first. She picked up the smallest box. He looked at it and he said, "What does she go through in a week?" She told him. He did a different calculation than the one she had been doing. He put the smaller box back and picked up the larger one. He said, "This one makes more sense if you think about it that way. That is the thing that people who have always had money do not understand about not having money. When you do not have enough, you buy small. You buy the thing that costs less right now, even when the thing that costs more would cost us less over time. Because right now is the only calculation you can make." He knew that. He had lived in that math. And so he did the calculation she could not afford to do. They walked through the store. She had a list. He did not take the list from her. He walked alongside her while she went through it. When she hesitated in front of something, when she reached for the cheaper version, when she put something back, he just quietly redirected. He did not make a performance of it. He did not announce what he was doing. He just walked beside her and helped her get what her daughter needed. Here is the part that gets left out of every version of this story. He talked the whole time, not about himself, not about shows or records or Las Vegas. He asked her questions, and then he listened to the answers. He asked where she was from originally. She told him she had grown up in Reno. He asked how she had ended up in Las Vegas. She said her husband had come for work 2 years ago. She stopped there, and he did not push on it. He understood what the stop meant. He asked about her daughter, what her name was, how old she was. She said her name was Marie. She was 14 months, he said. What does she do when she laughs? Carol looked at him sideways at that question. She said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Every baby has a specific thing they do when they really laugh." My youngest covers her face, like she cannot believe how funny something is. What does Marie do? Carol thought about it. She said she stumps her feet, both feet at once, like she is too excited to use them one at a time. He laughed at that. "A real one," he said. "That is a very good baby." There was a woman named Mrs. Dorothy Haas who was shopping in the same store that afternoon. She was in her 60s. She had come for cleaning supplies. She saw what was happening in that store, and she watched the whole thing from 2 aisles over. She did not speak to anyone about it for 11 years. She said later that it felt private, like something she had been allowed to witness, but was not supposed to announce. Mrs. Haas noticed something else. She noticed that Carol Briggs stopped being careful about halfway through the store. She stopped hesitating at prices. She stopped doing the math out loud with her hands. She just walked with him and put things in the cart. Mrs. Haas said, "I do not think she even noticed when it happened. She just stopped being afraid of the store, because someone was there with her who was not afraid of it." That is a thing I had never seen before, and I have never seen it since. He went to a register that was not busy. He put everything on the belt himself. He talked to Carol the whole time. Not about himself, not about performing, about her daughter, what her name was, how old she was. He asked like he was genuinely interested, and he was genuinely interested. That was the part that was impossible to perform. You can perform generosity. You cannot perform actual curiosity about a stranger's child. The total came to $31.14. He paid it the way a man pays for a coffee. He did not make her watch the transaction. He did not create a moment out of it. He put the money down, and then he turned back to her and finished the sentence he had been saying. When it was done, he helped her carry the bags to her car. She tried to thank him. He waved it off. Not rudely, in the way of someone who does not want to make a thing larger than it is. He said, "You have a good week. Give that little girl a hug from a stranger." Then he walked back into the store. He bought his cigarettes. He bought his newspaper. He went home. Here is something simple you can do right now. If this story reached something in you, the like button is right there. It takes 1 second, and it tells the algorithm that stories like this deserve to be found. Not for me, for the next person who needs this story. Stay with it. The stock boy who had been watching went back to his work when it was over. He said he did not tell anyone that day. He said, "I thought about it. I thought about telling the manager. I thought about telling Mother when I got home. But I did not. It felt like the kind of thing that gets smaller when you talk about it. So I just kept it." He carried it for 14 years before he mentioned it. He mentioned it to his wife on a drive to visit her parents. They had been talking about something unrelated, about people who had surprised them, about moments that did not fit the person you expected. And he told her about the Tuesday afternoon and the man in the aisle and the woman with the list. His wife asked, "Are you sure it was him?" He said, "I was 3 feet away." She asked, "Why did you never tell anyone before?" He said, "I did not want it to become a thing people argued about. Whether it happened the way I said. Some things you carry because they are yours and not theirs." Mrs. Has told her daughter the story in 1974. Her daughter told it to a journalist in 1988. The journalist wrote it down but never published it. He said he could not verify it. He could not verify it because Carol Briggs never came forward publicly. She never sold the story, never gave an interview about it. A woman named Patricia Morrow, who worked at that Walmart in the 60s, said she remembered a version of it. She could not confirm the details. She said, "I heard something happened with a famous person in the diaper aisle. I did not see it myself." 3 accounts, different levels of detail. They agree on one thing. Dean Martin paid for a stranger's groceries in a Las Vegas Walmart on a winter afternoon in 1963. On everything else, they differ. Here is what nobody talks about when they talk about stories like this. The question is not whether it happened exactly as described. The question is why 3 separate people kept it. Why a stock boy carried it for years before telling anyone. Why Mrs. Has waited 11 years. Why Carol Briggs never told it publicly at all. People do not guard stories that meant nothing. They do not spend 11 years deciding whether to speak about something that left no mark. They guard the things that were given to them. The things that felt like they belonged to someone else even while they were witnessing them. That is the thing about Dean Martin that his public life almost hides. The public life was huge. The television show, the Rat Pack, the records, the image of a man who had everything easy, who coasted on charm and good looks and the luck of being born with a voice. But that image was constructed out of real pieces. The ease was real. The charm was real. But the ease came from somewhere specific. It came from a man who had decided a long time before the fame arrived that the most important thing was to stay in contact with the actual weight of actual lives. And so he drove around Las Vegas on free mornings. And so he went to ordinary stores. And so he could see a woman putting back a box of diapers and know immediately what he was looking at. In the years after 1963, Dean continued performing. The Rat Pack was at its peak. The television show came, the movies, the records. From the outside it looked like a man at the absolute center of everything. People wrote about him constantly in those years. Profiles in magazines, television interviews, reviews. The image that emerged was consistent, effortless, easy, untroubled. A man for whom success had come naturally and sat lightly. None of those profiles mentioned Steubenville very long. They mentioned it the way you mention a birthplace, a data point, a before picture. Then they moved on to the after. The suits, the stage, the glass in the hand, but the people who actually worked with him in the hours before and after the show. The drivers, the assistants, the backstage crew. They told a different kind of story. A lighting technician who worked the Dean Martin show for 4 of its 9 seasons said that Dean knew every crew member by name. Not the producers, not the executives, the crew. He asked about their families, their kids, their weekends. He remembered what you told him. If you mentioned your son had a baseball game, he asked about it the following week. That is not charm. Charm is performed. That is attention. And attention is a choice. But people who knew him in those years say something else. They say he was always more comfortable in the ordinary moments than the big ones. Backstage was fine. In front of the cameras was fine. But the moments he returned to in conversation, the moments he mentioned when he was not performing, were moments like a Tuesday afternoon, a parking lot, a stranger, a small thing done quietly. His friend Mac Gray, who traveled with him for years, said Dean had a habit. When he had free time in a city, when there was no show, no obligation, he would go somewhere ordinary, a diner, a hardware store, a laundromat, just to be in rooms where people were doing the regular work of their lives. Mac said he never explained why. He just did it. I think it kept him somewhere real. When everything around you is designed to make you feel exceptional, you need a place where you are just a man in a store. He had 7 children. He talked about them constantly, not as accomplishments, as people. He wanted to know what they were thinking, what they were worried about, what they found funny. He called them. He showed up. He was, by most accounts of people who were there, a more present father than anyone expected a man of his career to be. The television show ran from 1965 to 1974. 9 years. He was on screen every week. Every week he did what he had always done. He made people feel like they were in the room with someone who was genuinely glad they existed. That is not a skill you can acquire. That is something that either comes from real experience of needing people to be glad you exist, or it does not come at all. In 1976, he stepped back from performing more consistently than he had before. He was 59 years old. He did not disappear. He still appeared. But the urgency of always being somewhere had softened. His son, Dean Paul, died in 1987. A military plane crash in the San Bernardino Mountains. He was 35 years old. Dean Martin never fully came back from that. Anyone who saw him in the years after said the same thing. Something had gone out. He still appeared, still performed occasionally. But the ease was different. The lightness had weight underneath it now that it had not had before. He did a concert tour in 1988 with Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. He left after the first few shows. He told the promoters he was not well. He told Sinatra he was sorry. He went home. He died on Christmas Day 1995. He was 78 years old. He died at home, quietly, the way he had preferred to do most things. Frank Sinatra died 2.5 years later. He said of Dean, he was the most naturally talented man I ever worked with. And the most decent. Those 2 words do not usually go together in that sentence. Most talented, most decent. Usually one crowds out the other. In Dean Martin they did not. Carol Briggs, if she is still alive, would be in her late 80s now. She never made herself part of this story publicly. That choice says something. It says she understood what the gesture was. It was not a transaction. It was not a story. It was just a man helping a woman carry her groceries on a Tuesday when nobody was looking. The moment was not hers to give away. Think about someone in your own life. Think about a time when someone helped you in a moment you had not asked for help. when they saw what you needed before you said it out loud, when they made it easy to accept, when they did not make you feel small for needing it. You know exactly what that felt like. You remember the specific weight of it. This is not a story about Dean Martin being generous. This is a story about what it means to carry where you came from without letting it make you bitter, to arrive somewhere good and still be able to see the people who are standing where you once stood. Dean Martin grew up counting coins in Steubenville. Dean Martin stood in the lobby of the Sands Hotel with presidents and movie stars. He was equally at ease in both places, not because he forgot one of them, because he carried both of them at the same time. You understand exactly what that costs. To never let yourself forget. To keep the weight of it with you even when you do not have to anymore. That is not nostalgia. That is character. Before this ends, think about someone in your life. Someone who helped you in a moment when you had not asked for help. Who saw what you needed before you said it. Who made it easy to accept? Did you ever tell them what that meant? Or did you go quiet the way most of us do? Tell me in the comments. If this story reached something in you, subscribe. Not for me, for the next story. Because the next one is about a night Dean Martin walked away from the biggest deal of his career without a word to anyone. And it is heavier than this one. Dean Martin spent 40 years making people feel at ease. That was the job, and he was extraordinary at it. But the job was not the whole man. The whole man was someone who had grown up counting coins and never forgot what that counting felt like. Who walked into ordinary places on ordinary days because he needed them to stay ordinary. Who helped a young woman in a diaper aisle not because anyone was watching but because no one was. Dorothy Has, the woman who watched from 2 aisles over, was asked once what she remembered most clearly. She said it was not the moment he offered to help. It was the moment after, when the transaction was done and he turned back to Carol and just kept talking. Like nothing had happened. Like it was simply the next part of the conversation. Because for him, that was Dean Martin. That was the Tuesday nobody filmed.